Sucking on my titties like you're Romulus and Remus. That's just what plays in my head when I show this image. Here we see the Capitoline Wolf. This is a depiction of the mythic origins of the founder of ancient Rome. So first of all, the ancient god of war, Mars, essays the virginal Rhea. She's a mortal woman and she is impregnated by this god Mars. She has these two twins, Romulus and Remus, who she promptly abandons because their great uncle, King Amulius, feared that one day they would overthrow him and seize the throne of Rome. Now, up until this time, Rome had been an Etruscan city. There was an Etruscan king sitting on that throne. So actually, ancient Rome was technically really founded by the Etruscans. If you don't know who the Etruscans are, check out our last couple videos on ancient Etruscan art. So what happens? These two children are abandoned, left to die. The king attempts to drown them, but they miraculously survive. And they were suckled by a she-wolf and raised by a shepherd. So yes, they were sucking on the titties of a she-wolf. They're raised by the shepherd. They eventually grow up, and these two eventually get into a fight. Romulus kills his brother Remus, and soon enough, Romulus sits on the throne of Rome. So this is the founding myth of ancient Rome, and it is really meant as a way to kind of set up the mythic origins of ancient Rome, that it is founded by someone who is a child of the god Mars, the god of war. Romulus goes on to found Rome, and eventually Rome becomes a republic, but then, as you know from ancient Roman history, goes on eventually to become an empire, and eventually Rome conquers much of the Mediterranean world. Welcome to this video on ancient Roman art, in which we will talk about the art of empire. I'm Dr. Megan Lorraine Devon, and I'm an art historian, and this is Art Trippin Lecture Series. Hi, I'm Dr. Megan Lorraine Devon, and this is Art Trippin. What are we going to look at in this video? First, I want to highlight some of the key points about ancient Roman art. What we're going to look at are examples of Roman portraiture and early Roman society. We will also look at the political nature of Roman art and architecture, and especially as it communicates ideas of power, ideas about the empire, ideas about the emperor himself, but also empire itself. And we'll see that the ancient Romans actually used art and architecture to connect the empire visually, which is why you will find Roman baths in modern day UK, Roman aqueducts in modern day Spain, and on, Roman roads throughout the Mediterranean region. We will also see in the later period, as Rome is expanding and the Roman Empire is growing, we'll start to see the incorporation of the art of conquered cultures. Here we can see a map that shows the extent of Etruscan territory. Remember that there was an Etruscan king sitting on the throne of Rome until the founding of what we now think of as the ancient Roman Empire. And here's another map. This is a map of the Roman Empire at its greatest extent. You can see that it basically covers the entire known world around the Mediterranean at the time. From Hadrian's Wall up in the north, all the way to the east, to the land between the two rivers, ancient Mesopotamia, covering all of what we today consider mostly Western Europe and North Africa. So how did this small provincial town grow to become this massive empire? We begin our journey in the Roman Republic. The period of the Roman Republic lasts from roughly 509 BCE to 27 BCE. In the year 27, we have the beginning truly of the empire. So what is the Roman Republic? Res publica, public business. This was established in 509 BCE with the expulsion of the Etruscan kings of Rome, and the Roman Republic was born. This was a government that was headed by two consuls who were elected annually by the citizens, and they were advised by a senate composed of appointed magistrates. So it's kind of a power sharing situation. Later, the Roman Empire period is characterized by a government headed by emperors and large territorial holdings all around the Mediterranean Sea in Europe, Africa, and Asia. And Rome grew in this period, not just through alliances, but of course, as an empire does, through conquest. But before we get to the empire, let's talk about Roman art during the Republic. So during the period of the Roman Republic, we see great innovations in architecture that really contribute to the expansion of Rome. When we look at Roman art, we see that at first it's really heavily influenced by the ancient Greeks, but it eventually distinguishes itself as different from the classical art of the ancient Greeks. The first thing that I want to look at is an example of Roman architectural innovations. Here we are looking at the Temple of Portinus. In modern day Rome, you can actually visit this. This is a temple dedicated to Portinus, who was the god that presided over the Tevere, the Tiber River, which is this really important river that flows through Rome even today. And back in the day, it used to connect Rome out to the sea. And of course, this is going to become important once Rome really becomes an empire and goes off pillaging and bringing home the spoils of war. All of these items are going to be brought home using the Tiber River. The Tevere is a really important river to ancient Rome. So this god, as you can imagine, is critical. This is the god who presides over the Tevere Tiber River. So the Romans were really knowledgeable about building materials, and they were extremely innovative. When you look at this temple, you might think that it sort of looks like a classical Greek temple. However, there are some differences. In fact, they're sort of more influenced by Etruscan architecture. An Etruscan temple has a clear front, sort of a front porch, and you see the same thing here on this temple. Of course, there are some elements that remind us of Greek temple architecture, the triangular pediment, the columns all the way around, but it is more of a closed temple like an Etruscan temple. But they did have some particular innovations. And one of their innovations that we can see depicted here in the Temple of Portinus is their use of inexpensive materials when possible, or they even used new materials like concrete, as we will see later. Here they use tufa, which is a local stone, and it's a very inexpensive stone. So this temple is built out of tufa and then covered with stucco and then painted to match the travertine. So it looked like a stronger travertine stone. It looked like a marble temple, but really it's an illusion. It's an optical illusion. It kind of reminds me of back in the 1990s, like everyone was like really into sponge painting their walls in their houses. This was like a design trend. And it's kind of this similar idea of masking the original material. Like an Etruscan temple, it has a central flight of stairs, columns on the front, and its kind of porch-like structure in the front. Different from Etruscan temples, it has this long, narrow, rectangular shape with the triangular pediment that is much more akin to a Greek temple. We have standard Ionic columns, and the base of the columns and the top of the podium were made of travertine from Tivoli near Rome, which is really a lot stronger than tufa, but it's also more expensive. So they used this cheap tufa and then plastered it over and painted it to look like marble. And so this attempt to mimic travertine shows us that it's really meant to resemble a Greek temple, but with this Roman innovation for saving time and money when building. Now, I've mentioned another major architectural innovation that's associated with the ancient Romans, and that is correct. They figure out how to use building materials, specifically concrete, to their advantage. So concrete is a composite material that's composed of coarse granular material, the aggregate or the filler, and then it's sort of embedded in this hard matrix. This is the cement or some kind of binder. And that fills in the space among the aggregate particles and sort of glues everything together. Some contemporary famous structures that are built using concrete are the Hoover Dam, the Panama Canal, and of course, for our purposes, the Roman Pantheon. This is really one of the first examples of a really early large-scale use of concrete technology in the ancient world. The Romans are widely credited with this invention. In fact, the Roman Colosseum itself was built largely of concrete, even though there are stone elements. And the concrete dome of the Pantheon is probably one of the largest concrete domes in the world for thousands of years. Fun fact, today concrete is the most widely used man-made material. After the Roman Empire collapsed, the use of concrete actually becomes pretty rare until the technology was repioneered in the mid-18th century. The Romans are also credited with mastering, not inventing, but mastering the rounded arch, which features the keystone that sort of holds everything in place. And of course, the rounded arch is the basis for the barrel vault, which becomes the basis for the groin vault. And then we can have a fenestrated sequence of groin vaults. So it's a groin vaults with windows. And of course, the hemispherical dome with the oculus, just like we see at the ancient Roman Pantheon. So these are some of the sort of architectural innovations of the ancient Romans. These architectural innovations are used to visually link the empire. Once we get to the period of empire, you will see Roman baths in the UK and Roman aqueducts in modern day Spain. And so the entire empire is linked visually through Roman architectural designs. But what else do we see when we look at art during the period of the Roman Republic? Let's look at an example from the period of the Republic, and let's talk about funerary sculpture in early Roman culture. Here we are looking at the man with the portrait busts of his ancestors. This is dated to the late 1st century BCE. It is made of marble. It's about 5'5", so I'm almost that tall, so life size. This is held in the Centrale Monte Martini, which is a really cool museum in Rome that is ancient Greek and Roman sculpture, but like in an early 20th century thermoelectric power plant. So if you want to go see this, that's where you go to see this in Rome today. We are looking at a patrician who is depicted with the busts of his ancestors. So first of all, what's a patrician? A patrician refers to the upper class Romans from which the senators came. So this is someone of the senatorial class, and this is in contrast to the plebes, the plebeians. Plebeian refers to the lower classes, or, the people of Rome. Speaking of the people of Rome, this is one of the best books that you could read if you want to learn about ancient Rome. Mary Beard is the quintessential historian of ancient Rome. I highly recommend picking up SPQR if you want to learn more about ancient Rome. And while we're at it, it's book talk now. I don't know. While we're at it, if you are interested in Stoic philosophy, I highly recommend reading Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. Back to the patrician bust. So what do we see? We see this man, a patrician man, a senator, holding these busts of his ancestors. Remember, a bust is like a statue that just depicts the head and shoulders of a figure. And these busts are presumably this man's ancestors. So when a Roman died, they would make a death mask, first of all. And then a bust was made to be displayed in the atrium of the family's house. So you can imagine a villa. There's going to be a kind of entryway. There will probably be an area that's open to the ceiling, so like the rain can fall into a little pool. And this is sort of the foyer or entryway of the Roman villa. This is also the sort of public area of the Roman villa, and wealthy Romans would keep these busts in this public area of their home. It's kind of like having family pictures in your living room today. What else would happen after a wealthy Roman would die? From that death mask that was made, wealthy Romans would actually hire actors to dress up in this mask and partake in the funeral processions so that the entire family could be there. So they might have death masks of many generations of ancestors. So all of these ancestors could be showing up for the funeral. And so you can see that there's really an importance and an emphasis on lineage and monumentalizing the ancestors. So here we're looking at a statue that is sort of depicting that same thing, this patrician man with these busts of his ancestors. And in the public arena, so I'm talking about public squares and on the public streets, but also in the public areas of the homes, patricians and members of the senatorial class used sculpture to advertise their position, their power, and their lineage. So you can imagine you're from a family of senators and you're coming over to another family's house, and you can see in the public areas of the house, you would see these statues, these busts, and you would presumably have been impressed by not only these powerful individuals, but also the lineage of who they are connected to, who their great ancestors were. So how does this compare to ancient Greek sculpture? As we know, the ancient Romans were very much influenced by ancient Greek sculpture. So you can see an interest in sort of anatomical accuracy and some of these other things that the ancient Greeks are concerned with. But you see something a little different, especially when you look more closely at Roman art from the period of the Republic. And what you will notice is a kind of verism, a truth seeking. This comes from the Latin veritas, for truth. So Roman verism is a modern term that refers to the use of the signs of age in Roman busts of senators to convey patrician values. So what do we see? We see furrows in the forehead, wrinkles around the eyes or mouth, sagging cheeks. All of these are very obvious signs of aging. So it shows us that this is an older gentleman. Why? Why would the Romans want to be depicted as older? Because these are important patrician values that are expressed through Roman Republican verism. These signs of age, the wrinkles, the furrowed brow, these connote wisdom, experience, honor, dignity, and civic virtue. And this is really seen in contrast to the ancient Greeks' love for the hot, fit, naked 20-year-old dude. So think of the idealized Greek statue of this really buff guy. Like, he is appreciated for his physical prowess, for his ability as a soldier or as an athlete. But here in Rome of the era of the Republic, instead, we see different values. This is really kind of a testament to Roman respect for civic leaders and elder statesmen. Now, you can find some of this in Hellenistic Greek art, some of this naturalism or signs of age. But for the Greeks, a Hellenistic style was more about documenting the social changes in the late period of Greek rule than it was about ideas of power. So for the Romans, verism was really about linking the senatorial class, the patrician class, to its ancestors, to a sense of lineage, and therefore to a way to maintain power. So even though we call this period a period that's a republic because the consuls are elected by the people, you can see that ancient Romans had really set it up so that power was something that was also inherited. Yes, nepotism is alive and well. It's been around for all times. So this has been the introduction to ancient Roman art, and we looked at 2 examples of art and architecture from the period of the Republic. If you want to know more about Roman art and what happens as ancient Rome moves from a republic to an empire, stay tuned for the next video in which I will talk about the Augustus of Prima Porta. If you like this video, please comment. Remember to subscribe to Art Trippin. As always, I'm Dr. Megan Lorraine Devon. This has been Art Trippin, the lecture series.